and welcome to episode number 14 of the Dose of Wonder podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin McCall. And today we're talking about dramatic behavior, the weird stuff you see online and also off, from my Medium article on the subject, plus also from sources like Psychology Today and Forbes, and some other more pop culture websites too. You may not have heard the word flouncing before, but I'm fairly certain you've seen it somewhere online without realizing what the behavior is called. According to Urban Dictionary, flouncing is leaving an internet group or thread with exaggerated drama and acting in ways to draw attention to the drama. It's the internet equivalent of storming out of the room and making a dramatic exit while slamming the door behind you on the way out. According to dictionary.com, this new modern internet slang word, quote, may or may not involve burning a few bridges or stirring the pot on the way out, end quote. So today's podcast is to help you decode dramatic personalities, looking into the psychology behind dramatic behavior and how social media seems to add fuel to the fire and make everything more dramatic than it needs to be. I'm sure you've probably seen this kind of behavior on Facebook or in comment threads around the internet, and I'm also certain these people have caused you to roll your eyes and reply to them with something along the lines of, "This isn't an airport, there's no need to announce your departure." I was curious about why people do this, so I raised the question on social media and got a reply from a friend who said, quote, so much of what is on social media is valued based on opinions and group dynamics, end quote. In real-life conflicts, we are supposed to feel sorry for the person who's dramatically storming out of the situation because they've been wounded and hurt. Some people might probably run after the aggrieved person and say, no, don't leave, stay. Sometimes this happens online as well. However, when people throw a big enough tantrum and cause a scene, especially if they aren't well known to other group members, people's reactions online are more likely to be, bye, don't let the door hit you on the way out. But before we get much further, let's actually define dramatic. Is it just someone who's like loud and attention-seeking, or is there more to it? According to researchers, there's definitely more to it than meets the eye, because studies have actually developed something called the Need for Drama Scale, or NFD for short, to measure this trait. And they found that those who scored higher on this scale shared three main characteristics or elements. Number 1, interpersonal manipulation. Number 2, impulsive outspokenness or gossip. And number 3 is a perceived persistent victimhood and being reactive due to that internal perception of being a victim. So it's not just about being a drama queen, but more like manipulating others to get what they want, even if that means stirring up some conflict to do that. Scientists also found that dramatic people tend to be more impulsive and therefore are more likely to jump into drama and tantrum mode. But how does that affect us? According to neuroscience, drama is another way of saying that someone lacks social and emotional skills, where there's a disconnect between the two. In reality, people are supposed to learn how to regulate their emotions and control their impulses from the time they become teenagers all the way into their adulthood. But due to today's reliance in an online world, and based on what we're seeing through these confrontations and dramatic outbursts on social media, this might not be happening anymore. And apparently there are two types of people in this world. Those who avoid confrontation, like me, I'm one of those people, and those who thrive on stirring the pot. So back to what I said a little bit earlier about running after the hurt person in real life. If someone's hurt, you'd run after them and say, hey, wait, come back. In the world of the internet, it isn't always possible to run after the aggrieved person in a group, the party that is hurt, which makes the dramatic exit an ineffectual behavior. And what if we go after them anyway, say, by sending them a message to try to reason with them, only so that they'd end up blocking us? Wouldn't that mean that they had their way of getting the last word so that they can sit smugly on their high horse and feel triumphant that they stood up to whatever perceived threat they felt? I did some research, and it turns out that there is so much psychological and neuroscience evidence to back up this behavior. Dramatic people want others to notice how upset or sad, angry, anxious, and frustrated they are in order to come to their rescue. So here's an example. Think of that friend who always has to subtly throw shade at others just to make themselves look better. That's a form of interpersonal manipulation, subtle maneuvering which can leave you feeling a bit off, but you can't really figure out why. And impulsive outspokenness is that they just blurt out whatever is on their mind, consequences be damned. That's the tendency to speak or type without thinking, which can lead to all sorts of drama, as you can imagine, especially in this age of social media. Like a snarky comment that you might post online without thinking about who might see it. I think we might have all been guilty of that once or twice, right? But what about this perceived persistent victim thing? That's someone who feels like everyone and everything is always against them, and they think they're the target in everything. They might misinterpret neutral comments as a personal attack, or feel like they're being wronged even when there's no evidence. So someone with a high score on the need for drama scale might be manipulative, impulsive, and constantly feel victimized. But it's important to remember that not everyone shows these traits, and it's a spectrum, not a diagnosis. We all have these aspects of ourselves to some extent, but it's only when they start to negatively impact someone's life and relationships that it becomes a problem. So we have a pretty good idea of what defines a dramatic personality, but why do some people seem to enjoy conflict and chaos? Is there something that just makes them crave this drama? It boils down to how our brains respond to stress and reward, and a hormone called cortisol, the stress hormone. So cortisol is actually helpful in small doses, like it helps us remember important or scary things, which is critical for our survival. We want to etch those things into our memory, and cortisol helps us do that. But when we're constantly exposed to conflict and drama, our cortisol levels stay elevated, and that's when problems start to arise. Like constantly feeling on edge and jumpy and snappy. But it's more than just feeling constantly stressed out. Prolonged high levels of cortisol can lead to depression and anxiety, and even physical health issues like heart disease. When people's beliefs, values, or ideals are threatened, instead of just removing themselves from the situation or quietly leaving, they become impulsive in their reactions and their expectation of the outcome. When we don't get the attention we seek, we feel anxious, and to ease that anxiety, we instinctively seek more drama to get the attention we are craving. But there is a downside to this drama: stress, which we all know is harmful to our health. According to Psychology Today, because conflict causes stress, which is our defense mechanism against perceived harm, it tells us one of two things. Either we've been hurt, or we're about to. If we think we're hurt, our brain switches into action and causes us to be more impulsive or reactive. And I'm going to go a bit David Attenborough on you now. So there's a study on tree shrews that are small mammals that are distant relatives of primates. And studies have found that when these shrews are constantly stressed by the dominant shrew in their group, they experience such high levels of the stress hormone cortisol that many of them die in weeks from the stress, which is another reminder of just how damaging chronic stress and drama can be. But here's a twist. Our brains are actually wired in a way that makes drama surprisingly addictive, like checking social media. And when we lose an argument and feel excluded, like in online social media settings, that can actually make us feel good, the relief we feel after conflict, because our brains are wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. And sometimes the relief that comes after a conflict can activate those same reward pathways, like our brains are trying to soothe us after a negative experience. So even though the drama itself might be stressful, afterwards, that can be rewarding, which is fascinating, and which is where social media comes in and amplifies all those feelings. It's like a breeding ground and a platform for constant drama. Because online conflict often feels less risky than face-to-face confrontations, people are more likely to engage in these outbursts and attention-grabbing behaviors, like that whole flouncing phenomenon, where people dramatically quit online groups or unfriend someone with a passive-aggressive post. It's all about creating a spectacle and getting a reaction. So we've established that some people have a higher need for drama, and that this can be fueled by the way our brains respond to stress and conflict, especially online. But how do we actually recognize these traits in ourselves and others? What are the red flags? Let's become drama detectives. One of the most obvious signs is that they seem to enjoy stirring the pot, and they get a kick out of provoking reactions and watching the chaos unfold. It's like they can't resist pushing people's buttons, like they thrive on creating tension, even if it ultimately creates more problems for them down the road. Remember that impulsive outspokenness we talked about, that often goes hand in hand with gossip and a love of spreading information, whether it's true or not? While drama thrives on those juicy tidbits and shocking revelations, accuracy be damned. And speaking of accuracy, another big red flag is that persistent sense of victimhood, or playing the victim card that we discussed earlier, where someone with a high need for drama often feels like everyone is out to get them, and they're misinterpreting those neutral comments as personal attacks and taking offense at the slightest provocation. It's like they can never be wrong, and any negative outcome is always someone else's fault, which is the idea of an external locus of control, that they aren't the problem, it's stuff outside of them that's the problem. It's the belief that they have no control over their own lives, and everything just happens to them, rather than being a result of their own choices and actions, which is a very disempowering mindset, and probably leads to a lot of resentment, which just feeds the drama cycle even more. And you know that classic trope of the dramatic friend who always seems to have one crisis after another? Which is another sign of a dramatic personality. Their life is a constant roller coaster of all this stuff happening to them. Breakups, job losses, family issues, and they're emotionally exhausting everyone around them with their own personal soap opera. So maybe some of these red flags sound familiar. Maybe you recognize them in a friend or coworker or even yourself. What can we do when we realize this? Is there any help for those of us who are drama magnets? First of all, just remember that these are just tendencies and not set in stone. And recognizing these traits or tendencies or red flags is the first step towards creating a more healthy mindset. It's trying to understand these things and trying to manage them. And there are strategies to help curb these tendencies in ourselves and others who are prone to dramatic flare-ups. One of the most important tools in the toolkit is creating a strong support network of people you trust and can confide in, which can be a huge buffer against stress. Surrounding yourself with those practical and level-headed people who can give you a reality check when things start going off the rails. It's like having a team of emotional first responders on speed dial. And here's another thing that's easier said than done, but is super powerful. Don't take things personally. Because it's so easy to get sucked into other people's drama, especially when you care about them. How do we detach without becoming emotionally distant? It's a delicate balance, and it's crucial to remember that other people's drama is often a reflection of their own struggles and insecurities and coping mechanisms. Their drama isn't always about you. You're not the problem. So even if it feels personal, their drama isn't necessarily you, it's them, which applies to online interactions where it's so easy to take offense at certain comments or posts. And it's important to remember that people often project their own frustrations and insecurities online, and it's not worth getting entangled in their emotional baggage. So build a strong support system and detach emotionally. Another essential strategy is learning to regulate your own emotional responses. So how do we do that? This means taking a pause before reacting and asking yourself, is this worth engaging in? Will reacting just escalate the drama? So that classic advice of taking a deep breath before responding to that email can be so helpful. It's taking control of your own emotions instead of letting them control you. And this applies to online behavior as well. Like resisting the urge to flounce dramatically from a group or post a scathing comment you'll regret later. So we need to learn to choose to disengage from the drama rather than feeding it. Remember, you always have the power to walk away. So far we've been talking a lot about protecting ourselves from drama, but what about the drama creators? Again, it's important to remember that people who are prone to drama aren't necessarily malicious or intentionally trying to hurt others. And remind yourself that their behavior is often driven by deeper issues, like insecurity or anxiety or a lack of coping skills. It's about struggling with their own internal battles, which isn't an excuse for bad behavior, but understanding those underlying motivations can help us approach these situations with more empathy and compassion. Because, as I said earlier, it's so easy to get caught up and start judging and labeling people. But there's a lot more going on behind the scenes that we might not know about. And people who have dramatic tendencies can change their behavior with self-awareness and support from others, and a willingness to develop healthier coping mechanisms. And in that way, they can create better and healthier relationships. So what's the takeaway here? How can we all live peacefully in a world where it seems like drama is unavoidable, especially in the wild west of the internet? As I said, it all starts with awareness, as most things do, it seems. Learning and understanding the signs of a dramatic personality, and recognizing the underlying psychology and using the tools and strategies I mentioned earlier to navigate these complex situations. The more we understand it, the better we can deal with it. But it's also about taking responsibility for our own emotional well-being, setting healthy boundaries, and choosing to engage in constructive conversations rather than stoking the drama cycle fire, especially in today's world, where it feels like outrage and negativity dominate so many online spaces. So, we've covered lots of stuff in today's episode. Defining dramatic personalities, exploring the psychology behind their behavior, and learning some strategies to cope with drama on and offline for navigating those tricky situations. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you listeners with a question to ponder. Knowing what we now know about drama and the brain, and how our online spaces often seem to increase and stoke those tendencies, how can we create online environments that foster constructive dialogue instead of feeding this need for conflict? It's a question that researchers and social media platforms are grappling with right now. As socially wired beings, we love storytelling. It helps bond us together. But in today's fast-paced world, we have limited time and shorter attention spans, and therefore we are becoming less patient. So the way we communicate today through storytelling has changed. This includes some positive changes, such as the increase of TED Talk videos. But on the flip side, our social interactions on digital platforms are filled with misinformation and gossip. As a social species, we all require attention, but social media has caused an excess in attention-seeking behaviors by its 24/7, all-pervasive availability, and psychologists believe that this behavior is driven by emotional desperation. It's a complex issue, but I think there are a few things we can focus on. I think the most impactful changes actually start with us at the individual level. We can all make a conscious effort to change our own online behavior. So instead of getting sucked into the outrage cycle, we can choose to engage in more thoughtful discussions and be more mindful of how our words impact others, and maybe hit that pause button before firing off a reactive comment. So basically, being the change we want to see in the world, even if it might seem a bit idealistic. But think about it. If each of us committed to even small changes, like being more respectful of different viewpoints and avoiding personal attacks and not spreading negativity, it could, again, as I've said in previous podcasts, have a ripple effect. A ripple effect of kindness and understanding online. And maybe those small acts of conscious communication could start to shift the overall tone of online spaces. And as more people opt out of the drama cycle, maybe we can start to rewire our brains to crave connection through genuine dialogue instead of conflict and negativity. That's a goal worth striving for, isn't it? Moving from drama to dialogue. We may not have control over our environment, But as I've learned through my mindfulness study and work over the years, we do have control over how we react to it. So the next time you feel like the internet is against you, instead of angrily announcing, "I'm leaving," to a bunch of people who don't really know you and probably don't really care, save your energy. Learn the art of protecting your well-being and quietly shut the door behind you on your way out. So, thanks for listening to this exploration of dramatic personalities and its impact online and also in the real world. And I hope we can create more positive and drama-free spaces, both on the internet and in our everyday lives. Next week, I'll be getting into some musings I've had about sleep and our different chronotypes. Until next time, thanks for listening, and don't forget to live with a dose of wonder.